Welcome into another episode of Locked On Phillies. And in today's episode, I'm going to tell you why the Philadelphia Phillies window for championship contention isn't closing anytime soon.
You are Locked On Phillies, your daily Philadelphia Phillies podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Yes, this is Locked On Phillies. I'm your host, Connor Thomas. Thank you so much for joining us today. We come to you as part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. You may know me from some of my other work in the sports talk space. I've been on air over at 97.5 The Fanatic, doing sports talk radio here in Philadelphia for 5 years. I've been a credentialed Philadelphia Phillies media member for 3 seasons, and this is my 4th year as the host of Locked On Phillies. Please make sure that you're rating and reviewing if you're listening to this in podcast form. We're available wherever you get your podcasts. If you haven't checked us out on the YouTube yet, please do. Check us out, Locked On Phillies on YouTube, and hit that subscribe button when you do. It'll give you notifications when new episodes are posted. Subscribing on YouTube is also a great way to help us out, help support Locked On Phillies, so I appreciate everyone who's done that, and we'll do that in the future. So today's episode, I've got an interesting conversation to lead us off because we talked on air at 97.5 The Fanatic this morning on Kincaid and Salchunas about the Phillies contention window. And my contention on the Phillies contention is that their window is not closing anytime soon. So we're going to lead off with that. But I also want to talk about a doubling down on something I said yesterday about a bounce back year for Bryson Stott. And I also want to take a look at some early reports of young prospects, young top prospects for the Phillies' first major league, there it is, spring training. Almost such a perfect intro. All right, let's get into why the Phil's window isn't closing first and foremost, though. So we're starting to talk a little bit more baseball now on the radio because the aftermath of the Eagles season has left this void. The Sixers are not all that good, and the Flyers are still rebuilding. So we're starting to look towards baseball season, the next championship contending team here in Philadelphia. And part of the question was, well, how long is this window opening? If JT Realmuto doesn't resign, and Kyle Schwarber doesn't resign, and Nick Castellanos ends up getting traded, those are 3 big-time pieces of this team that you might say, okay, if those guys go, the window may be shut. Bryce Harper is only getting older. Trey Turner is only getting older. Zach Wheeler, Aaron Nola. These guys are not necessarily on like the back end, but they're not young players, right? None of those guys that I just ran through are like young professional baseball players. So there may be this thought that, oh, wow, the window is going to be shutting soon on the Philadelphia Phillies. If they don't win this year and those guys don't re-sign, bang, window closed, because you're going to have a conversation about the Bohm trade opportunities that you looked into this offseason, and what in the world do you do in the outfield? If Brandon Marsh and Yohan Rojas don't get it done, you need to do something different there. Max Kepler's only on a 1-year deal. Like, there's all of this stuff that you got to figure out if the Phillies don't win it all this year. But here's why the Phillies window isn't closing anytime soon. I just want you to think about this, right? So first and foremost, what do the Phillies have in-house to mitigate the loss of stars currently on the team? Now, Aiden Miller is not ready for Major League Baseball. Neither is Justin Crawford, but they're not far away. So you have 2 top prospects we're going to talk about later on in the episode. Let's say that Nick Castellanos walks away or is traded. It would have to be traded because he has another year on his deal. But let's say for whatever reason, he's no longer with the organization after this coming season. Well, you have Yohan Rojas locked down. You have Brandon Marsh locked down. They would play 2 of the 3 outfield spots. And you may have to bring in a free agent to fill in like a gap spot or 2. But then within probably 2 years, Justin Crawford is going to debut at the major league level. He is a highly touted outfield prospect. In the infield, let's say you move Alec Bohm. There were trade rumors about that this year, and that's a thing that you're going to do. Well, if Alec Bohm is traded, Aiden Miller's probably only a year away from being realistically able to play at the major league level. I don't know about contribute, but play at the major league level. Guys that are going to be here. Like Bryson Stott is going to be here. Bryce Harper is going to be here. Trey Turner is going to be here. And I don't think there's a major decline coming in Bryce Harper's game in the next 3 to 5 years. Like once you get to 4 or 5, maybe you'll start to see this like fall off, but he hasn't really shown signs of that. If anything, he's shown signs of like some injuries slightly getting to him, but it's not production. When he's available, he hits the bleep out of the baseball. Trey Turner, I don't think you're seeing a major drop-off coming anytime soon either. I think he just had a period where he had to get more comfortable in Philadelphia and what his role was with this team. And I don't know that we'll see like an MVP candidate Trey Turner ever in his career with the Philadelphia Phillies. But will we see the guy we saw last year, who was pretty darn good and good enough to be the all-star starter at shortstop for the National League? I think we can see that guy for another, again, 3 to 5 years. So with that in mind, what do the Phillies look like for the next 3 to 5 years? Well, the only guys that you'd probably look at as not being here are the 3 guys that I named. Nola and Wheeler are on long-term extensions. And if those guys start to fail, well, you have Christopher Sanchez locked down. You now have Jesus Luzardo under team control for a little bit. But also, you can re-sign Jesus Luzardo, who is on the younger end of high-level starting pitchers in Major League Baseball. And you have this guy, Andrew Painter, coming up soon that's going to buffer the rotation, right? So you have a elite-level pitching prospect in Andrew Painter that could take the place of any big-time arm that you may lose or see regress. That's the word that I'm looking for. And you're not losing Zach Wheeler or Aaron Nola for a while. They're both under contract for a long time. So the pitching staff's going to be good, right? The bullpen, you can rebuild the bullpen. Bullpens are kind of the revolving door of baseball teams. Guys are in and out every year for every team. That's just how the reliever market works. You have some good guys that you like. Orion Kirkring could be here forever. Like, that guy is young. He is under team control. Like, he could be a stalwart in the bullpen. That's why it's big that he has a big year, because he could be a lockdown piece in this bullpen that is the cornerstone of it. But bullpens are things that you just naturally, as like someone who runs a baseball organization, that's one of the things you say, okay, well, every year we're kind of going to have to rebuild this. That's just how it goes. But you have prospects to fill in the outfield, the infield, and you also have a pitching prospect that's a monster. So that's your cavalry arriving to relieve guys like Nick Castellanos and JT Realmuto and Kyle Schwarber and anything that you lose in the aging of Zach Wheeler and Aaron Nola, or if you lose Ranger Suarez, who's heading into the final year of his contract. But the other reason the Phillies window isn't closing anytime soon is you have to look at how the Philadelphia Phillies acquired the guys that they currently have. So let's say Realmuto, Castellanos, and Schwarber all come off the books. Those are guys that are making, like 20 to 30 a year, if I'm just giving a rough estimate of those 3 salaries. So let's even go on the low side. Let's say that's an extra $60 million a year to work with just in salary there. Let's say Ranger goes. Let's say like you make a trade for somebody like Kepler doesn't resign. There's going to be open money for the Philadelphia Phillies to use once they lose these guys. And when you just look at the impact players on their team. So Brandon Marsh was traded for. Johan Rojas came from the organization. Max Kepler was a free agent signing. Nick Castellanos, a free agent signing. Alec Boehm, in-house guy. Trey Turner, free agent signing. Bryson Stott, homegrown. Bryce Harper, free agent signing. JT Realmuto, a trade with the Miami Marlins. So the only guys that were homegrown Philadelphia Phillies were Boehm, Stott, and Rojas, who was a backup guy in the outfield, right? As far as position players are concerned. The way the Philadelphia Phillies built this team is not dependent on having those prospects. And now they have those prospects. If anything, the Phillies are in a better position for team building right now than they were when Bryce Harper first signed with the Phillies. Like when Bryce Harper first signed, it was, now we have the attraction. Maybe we can bring other guys and pay them to come here. This is a situation where, like, let's say Boehm and Stott have good years, right? Well, then you have a situation where, how does Aiden Miller factor in? You could figure it out, but you've got a great prospect that might not have a place to play because you have other young players, and then Trey Turner there in the infield. Your infield would be set. In the outfield, you could put Justin Crawford out there. You still have Marsh as a young player. You still have Rojas as a young player. I mean, they're not the world's strongest team, but you're not paying any of those guys all that much money. So if you wanted to go splurge on an outfielder, you could do that. Your rotation's pretty much locked down. If you need to replace Ranger Suarez, well, guess what? Andrew Painter's going to take that position. You'll have a starting five for next year without having to spend any additional money over what you're paying guys already on their current contracts. So the Phillies did not create this team by just drafting well, developing well, and then bringing these guys to the majors. And once they're gone, the coffers are empty in the farm system. They didn't trade a bunch of top prospects to get the guys that they have. Remember, Sixto Sanchez went in the JT Realmuto trade. He never really turned into anything. I want to say J.A. Happ, but that's not it. I can't remember the darn catcher's name at this time that went to Los Angeles as part of the Brandon Marsh trade. Logan O'Hoppe. I knew it was going to come to me. It would be nice to have him with JT Realmuto starting to decline now, but you have this guy, Eduardo Tate, who's a young player, but a great catching prospect. And in 2 to 3 years, we're going to start to have a conversation with him at the major league level. Now, you may need a stopgap catcher. You may need Rafael Marchand to step in a little bit for a couple years. You may sign JT Realmuto to a 2-year extension. Whatever the case is, the Phillies have done this by being aggressive with the payroll and prudent with their free agent signings, using the city and the contention to attract other high-level marquee free agents. Bryce Harper's still here. Dave Dombrowski's still here. John Middleton's still got his checkbook open. They're going to continue to cut the check. So as long as the team is willing to spend, and they have every year of John Middleton's post-Bryce Harper signing life up the payroll, then they're going to be in contention. They are, because teams that spend are in contention in Major League Baseball as long as they have a guy at the head of the snake that knows how to put a team together, and Dave Dombrowski knows how to put a team together. So will contention always look the same? No, and it never does for teams year to year, right? You can have a run of 2 to 3 years, but eventually you're replacing key guys, or you're re-upping key guys, or you're bringing up a prospect. But are the Phillies going to continue to be contenders past this year, even if they lose Kyle Schwarber and JT Realmuto? Yes. And that's because John Middleton will pay out the wazoo to make sure that they are contenders. And that's something that you should feel good about as Phillies fans. Don't forget that you have an owner that is heavily committed to winning, and he has not talked about anything else. And I don't think that's changing anytime soon. So as much as we look at the player side of it, look at the guy up there who's signing the paychecks, he's going to cut the check every single time. So I had that conversation with people that thought the window was closing. I don't think it's closing anytime soon for the Philadelphia Phillies. It shouldn't be a comfort, because you can have your window open and you can never win one. You can be close and never win one. We want to see them win a World Series. But if you think they're going to just all of a sudden fall into obscurity like they did in 2012, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, that's not going to happen with this team. Not with a Bryce Harper here, not with John Middleton, this current version of John Middleton, not with Dave Dombrowski at the helm. And the other thing, too, real quick, when Dave Dombrowski leaves, you've got Sam Fuld, you've got Preston Mattingly, 2 guys who are seen as future big-time front office executives at the head of organizations. So the Phillies are set up for the future as well as ready to contend currently. Maybe not a World Series championship future, but they might not have a World Series championship present. There's a lot of questions to be answered about this team, but they're not going to just go turn into the Washington Nationals or the Miami Marlins of the division. No, they're going to continue to compete. Coming up next, we're going to talk a little bit about an interesting story Matt Gelb from The Athletic uncovered about Bryson Stott as he returned to spring training and discussed the struggles last year. I knew there was something weird. I didn't realize it was this weird. We'll tell you what went on with Bryson Stott last year coming up as we continue today's episode. Let's talk about SelectQuote first, though, because in sports, having a winning strategy is everything. It's how the best teams make it to the Super Bowl, the World Series, the Olympics. The same goes for life. Having a strategy like life insurance from SelectQuote can protect your financial legacy and keep your family's future secure. SelectQuote makes it super easy to find the perfect life insurance policy. As one of America's leading insurance brokers with nearly 40 years of experience, they've helped over 2 million customers find $700 billion in coverage since 1985. What sets SelectQuote apart is their personal touch. Unlike other brokers that offer one-size-fits-all policies, their licensed agents tailor coverage to fit your unique needs, which is what everyone wants, right? You don't just buy shoes for everyone. You buy shoes that are your size. You buy shoes that might be something wide if you have wider feet. Like, everything's different. You need your own personal policies, and they've got that for you as SelectQuote. They'll find it for you. If you're in good health, you might even qualify for same-day coverage of up to $5 million. No medical exam required. And it's more affordable than you'd think. You can get up to $1 million in coverage for as little as $20 a month. Get the right life insurance for you for less at SelectQuote.com/locked-on. Go to SelectQuote.com/locked-on today to get started. That's SelectQuote.com/locked-on. SelectQuote. They shop and you save. All right, let's talk a little bit about Bryson Stott. And credit to Matt Gelb for some excellent reporting on this to give us an idea of what's going on. So Matt Gelb did a feature article, as he's been doing with a lot of players as spring training gets going. What happened in the offseason? What are you looking forward to this year? What's going to be different from last year? And he talked to Bryson Stott. And something that people knew about Bryson Stott this past year was his production was not good. He did not have a good year at the dish in 2024. And part of the explanation for that internally was, well, Stott's stuck between a couple of approaches. Does he get aggressive early in the count and kind of change what made him really good with 2 strikes, where he would just be selective and know that he could protect if he needed to? Or does he wait and let those pitches go by and get into a situation where you're behind the 8 ball and you're constantly feeling like you're battling uphill? It's just, how do you attack the strikes you get early in an at-bat for a hitter that was so good with 2 strikes? And it seemed like Bryson Stott almost got too comfortable with getting to a 2-strike approach, and then pitchers figured him out a little bit more than they had in the past in his career. And the next thing you know, he wasn't the same 2-strike hitter. He ended up striking out more weak contact. Part of it was he was unlucky with the contact he had. He did strike me as one of the more unlucky Philadelphia Phillies hitters last year. Like, he didn't get as much out of his swings as he deserved to, but he also wasn't doing as much as he should have been to put himself in good position to earn positive outcomes from those swings. So a lot of stuff needs to be worked on by Bryson Stott. Now, I didn't see a complete de-evolution as a hitter. I didn't see a guy that was lost up there. I saw a guy that was battling more internally than externally. There are some guys that walk to the plate in a Major League Baseball game and they don't beat themselves. No, they just get beat by every pitcher in the book. They're just not good enough to hit at this level. And listen, that happens. It's the major leagues, man. These guys throw unbelievable stuff in today's baseball. But Bryson Stott has never really struck me as a player that gets out because pitchers can beat him. He gets out recently because he can't decide how he wants to go about it himself. And you'd much rather have the problems be something you can figure out about yourself than just like, I'm not good enough. Bryson Stott is a major league caliber hitter. I firmly believe that. I will not have anyone tell me differently. I hope I'm not wrong, because that would be a major, major miss for the Philadelphia Phillies and a guy that they thought they had one in. But my eyes tell me that this dude can be a plus major league hitter. But we got a new piece of the puzzle that was brought into the equation by this Matt Gelb article in The Athletic, which if you don't subscribe to The Athletic, you should. There's amazing stuff in there all the time. But apparently, Bryson Stott was struggling through most of last year with a major elbow issue. Now, when I say major, it bothered him a lot. He was able to play through it. Part of the reason was, according to reports, it was sustained during the time where Trey Turner was out, and Stott felt the need to play through it because, well, you can't be missing both of your middle infielders. You already had Edmundo Sosa playing shortstop, so who would play second? It would have put a major strain on the Philadelphia Phillies infield if Stott had gone down at that time. But it was like some nerve issue in his elbow, something that happened when he hyperextended his elbow on swings. So when he took big, heavy swings, it bothered him. He says he's feeling fine now. And an offseason will do that, where you take the time to rehab and everything. Listen, I've had issues like this in my baseball career, and I can't speak to it at the major league level, but I can speak to it as just kind of like a feel thing. Having, like, my right elbow is never going to be the same from pitching. And I used to get the pins and needles. I used to not be able to feel like my fingers. It's a very discomforting feeling. Now, luckily for me, I pitched, so I was more in control of, like, being able to do it over and over and over again. Like, if I was going to exert more effort on a pitch, I knew it beforehand, and I could kind of gear up for that. As a hitter, sometimes you see a pitch you want to go after, and it's a split-second reaction, and I can't even imagine dealing with something close to what I dealt with, like trying to hit major league pitching and trying to take those big swings that major league batters do. Like, it's not fun. So is it as simple as saying Bryson Stott had an injury all last year and that's why he had the year that he had? No, because there's still clearly problems with the approach. There were clearly things mentally that he's trying to figure out as still a young professional baseball player. But it should make you feel better as a Philadelphia Phillies fan that there is an explanation physically as to why Bryson Stott's performance dipped last year, right? So what does healthy Bryson Stott look like? Who knows? Yesterday, when we did like stock up, stock down for Philadelphia Phillies hitters, I believe we did that yesterday. One of our more recent episodes, we did that. All the days run together when you start doing this many episodes again, and the season gets back rolling. But I said that Bryson Stott might be the guy that I look at as the most improved year-over-year Philadelphia Phillies hitter. And I stand by that. And this only makes me more bullish on that prediction because if indeed that elbow injury was holding him back, well, I didn't even know about that. So if I already thought he was going to have a bounce back year based on just the change in approach, or I guess the resetting of the approach to what we saw earlier in his career that made him a great hitter, that guys like John Kruk said could win a National League batting title one day, be a leadoff hitter for the Philadelphia Phillies one day. Like, that's not me saying it. That's a former professional baseball player who was a pretty darn good hand-eye type of hitter in John Kruk. So, there's a lot of belief in Bryson Stott. And I think just naturally the ebbs and flows of a young career, the gut feeling of the trend he's on would be a significantly improved year this year. But now that you're bringing in the injury recovery part of the equation, you should feel even better about that, right? Like, could Bryson Stott be an all-star this year again? I'll say, I don't know if he's going to put together like an all-star caliber year. That might be a bridge too far. But is he going to be a guy that adds to this lineup's ability to put the ball in play? Absolutely. And last year, was this team missing that? Absolutely. Like, you worry about the Philadelphia Phillies going out this offseason. A lot of fans worry about this. How do they bring in players that break the mold of what this team is, which is strikeouts or long ball, attacking aggressively, not having as measured of an approach at the plate, getting yourselves out too often? Well, you battled through that by getting a guy like Bryson Stott, who is one of your better contact hitters and not at all a guy that should be chasing home runs, to get back to being one of your better contact hitters and not chasing home runs or not chasing pitches he shouldn't. Like, he is one of the easier projects to turn into the mold of what people want this Phillies offense to be, in opposition to what they were in the past couple of years of living and dying by the long ball. And last year, I think that really killed them to not have him at his best. If he becomes like a second Trey Turner, my goodness, let's go. Like, this whole dynamic of the offense shifts. So Bryson Stott, I really need him to have a big year. The Phillies really need him to have a big year, I should say. But I really expect him to have a big year compared to what he did last year. Coming up next, I don't think either of these guys are going to have a big year, at least at the major league level. They're not going to play. But what does the experience mean for guys like Aiden Miller and Justin Crawford, who are in their first big league camp? And where do we need to sit with expectations as the fan base? There's a little bit of hold your horses that I'm going to have to do coming up, but it is fun to see these guys take in some great experiences that they're having for the first time. We'll talk about the young prospects in camp coming up as we wrap up today's episode. So let's talk Aiden Miller and Justin Crawford. These are two of the younger guys in camp. I believe Aiden Miller may actually be the youngest guy in camp. And is Justin Crawford the same age? Let's do a little bit of research, because I know Aiden Miller is 20 years old. I remember saying this stuff about like Andrew Painter when he first started getting talks about potentially getting invited to camp. But now Andrew Painter obviously been around for a little bit. Justin Crawford is 21 years old. So I wouldn't be surprised if these are the two youngest guys in camp. I know Miller is the youngest guy. So they're up playing with the major league team now. Now we'll see how many innings they actually get. It's going to be really exciting to actually see them in games and watch them play against some major league competition, see a major league pitcher or two, get an idea of what goes on. Like, I don't care if Aiden Miller comes up to the plate at Baycare Ballpark and hits a home run over Frenchies in left field, and it's off some guy who's going to be a double-A pitcher for the Pittsburgh Pirates or something this year, I'm not going to say, I don't know, it was off of nobody. Just like everybody else, I'm going to be on Twitter losing my mind about how this guy is the next great infielder prospect for the Philadelphia Phillies and maybe the greatest infield prospect of all time. Like, obviously, that's way too far, but I'm going to go nuts just like everybody else is my point. So I don't really care what level of competition these guys are facing personally. I'm just excited that they're getting the opportunity to do this for the fan base where we can actually like focus on them a little bit more than we do when they're at AA or high A ball. So that's the one good thing, exposure. And it's exposure two ways. The fan base's exposure to these guys, but their exposure to what it's like to be at the major league spring training camp. Like, it's got to be an insane experience to be a 20-year-old kid. Can't even drink yet. He's living with his parents still, and or at least he's living with his parents for spring training. It's just going out there and saying, oh, yeah, that's Bryce Harper. Oh, that's Trey Turner. Nick Castellanos, Kyle Schwarber, Zach Wheeler, Aaron Nola, these guys that you probably grew up watching. Remember, he's not that far removed from high school. At 20 years old, he's probably, 3 years removed from high school, I guess would make sense based on when he was drafted. Like, Bryce Harper was winning MVPs while this dude was probably in middle school. It's got to be pretty cool for him to be up there with the major league guys. And the same goes for Justin Crawford. Now, a little bit different for him because his dad played professional baseball. So he was around the game growing up. But to get that invite and be like, oh, wow, I actually belong at this level now that my dad played at, or at least for spring training, I belong at this level. It's an encouragement of the work that these players have already put in. It can be a confidence boost for these players to say, hey, we know you're not at the major league level yet, but you're in camp because we believe you're going to be. And what does that do for a young player's progression? Well, it lets them see how major league players work. It lets them believe that they can be part of that action one day. It lets them know the organization has faith in them. And it also allows the fan base to start rooting for them more. And don't get me wrong, like, that's a big part of a player's lifespan as a baseball player, right? I think Scott Kingery, and you might be like, why in the world did you just say the name Scott Kingery? I think Scott Kingery played behind the eight ball from the jump because of the contract that he was given by Matt Klentak. He was given this huge extended contract deal or guaranteed contract deal before he even played at the majors. So when he got to the majors, the fan base was already like, who's this punk kid that's getting all this money already? You better be like Chase Utley reborn, or you better be whoever you want to compare Scott Kingery to. You better be great immediately. And that's not a fair place to put somebody. So having the fan base root for you or be excited about you or have proper expectations for what you're going to be is a huge part of your development as a player. And that brings me to my next point on Aiden Miller and Justin Crawford. As exciting as they are, as much as how I said I was going to go to Twitter and like freak out when Aiden Miller hits his first home run this spring, if he does indeed go yard, or Justin Crawford makes a great play in the outfield or shows off his athleticism, these guys are not playing Major League Baseball this year unless something goes severely, severely wrong at the Major League level. Like, there would have to be a major, major issue for either Aiden Miller or Justin Crawford to play for the Philadelphia Phillies this year. And that is okay. Baseball, patience is a virtue. When developing prospects, you don't want to bring them up too fast because just like we were talking about with Kingery, a lack of confidence can create a regression, which can create more lack of confidence. You get caught in this vicious cycle, and the next thing you know, you're the Billy Bean cuts from his playing career in Moneyball, where it's just he's a former top pick, and he can't make it at the major league level, and he's just a journeyman. Next thing you know, he's the GM of the team. Like, you don't want to kill a player's confidence early. You don't want to, as a fan, rush them to the majors because they still have development to do. And you also don't want to ruin your expectations, because I don't want anyone mad at Dave Dombrowski. The second, like, Alec Bohm makes an error this year, I don't want people like tweeting like, why didn't Dave Dombrowski have Aiden Miller on the opening day roster? Like, it's not realistic. It's going to be fun to see what these guys could be. They're going to play for the Philadelphia Phillies one day, unless there's some crazy trade in the works. And I don't think that they'd move Miller or Crawford at this point, because you're going to have to rebuild this team, or at least reload this team at some point. But just don't get too far ahead of yourself with these guys are playing. I expect to see them at the major league level this year. They should be up no matter what they do in spring training. Like Aiden Miller could bat 1,000. He's not making the opening day roster. Same with Justin Crawford. It's just not their time yet. Next year, we're going to have a very, very different conversation. But as exciting as we get for these young prospects, remember that they're still 20 and 21 years old. They'll get there when they get there. And when they do, our hope is it'll be as exciting as it's looked like through their path through the minor leagues. That's all for today's episode. Ooh, man, I can't talk again. That's all for today's episode of Locked On Phillies. Thank you so much for joining us today. Once again, we come to you as part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Please make sure you're rating and reviewing in podcasts, wherever you get your podcasts. YouTube, hit that subscribe button and get you notifications when new episodes are posted. It's free. It's easy. It really helps us here on Locked On Phillies. And, just keep your ear to the ground listening for this Phillies news here on Locked On Phillies because we're getting closer to game day. Their first game's Saturday. So as the week progresses, we might have to look a little bit into what to watch for on game day and who their opponents are coming up. So we will get into that later this week. But I will talk to you tomorrow on our next episode of Locked On Phillies.